For the personal experience speech, you want to keep in mind some of the things you'll need to know in order to be as organized as possible for this particular speech. First and foremost, keep in mind that whatever story or stories you choose, you want them to be appropriate for your situation. So if you are in a classroom full of other classmates, you aren't going to want to share a story that is necessarily too sensitive. If you are doing a story that might make you highly emotional, that may be something you are uncomfortable with. For example, occasionally I'll have people who will talk about the birth of their children and how that changed their lives, and that can sometimes lead to teary eyes and an inability to finish the speech. Remember, you're likely feeling a lot of anxiety and emotion when you get up to give a speech regardless. So if you pick an emotional topic on top of the fact that you feel any form of anxiety, it's going to make it more difficult for you to maintain control when you speak. So just keep in mind what is considered appropriate for this particular speech presentation. Next, make sure you're organized. If you have a single story that flows neatly in chronological order, then set it up that way. If you don't really have a chronological order, you don't have a this came first and then this and then this, then consider how to organize each of the pieces of your speech. Are there multiple small stories that add up to a whole? That might work. Then you can use that as your organizational pattern. Are there major things you learned as you progress through a period of your life? Maybe you want to do something like that. Just make sure, regardless, that you have it organized in a way that makes logical sense. Also remember that whatever visual you use, and you may not need one, but in many cases you will need some kind of a visual, and you will want to bring that in a non-digital format. So you're not required to use a visual for this, but if you want images or items or anything like that, you're more than welcome to bring them into the classroom. And we can project them up onto the screen if it's a hard copy picture, or we can pass around the item or what have you. So think about what is necessary for your speech. But we aren't doing PowerPoints or any kind of digital visual aid at this point. And finally, you're going to need an outline for this whole process. Now, here is sort of a layout of some of the things that you need to have in your outline. First, make sure you have a very distinct introduction, body, and conclusion. Keep in mind that you're going to need the details to go with that. So here's a sample outline. If you take a look here, we have an introduction with an attention getter and a thesis. And the thesis will be sort of the moral of the story. Then you have the body, which this could be done in a couple of different ways. So this is kind of just my example here. The body would have a beginning, and you can use in this kind of how the story starts, maybe some of the thoughts and feelings that you had during that point. Then go to the middle or the bulk of your story. Talk about the basics. Who, what, when, where, how did this whole thing work? And don't ever forget to include the thoughts and feelings that are occurring during that time. And then the end. What happened in the end? When it was all over, when all was said and done, what were you thinking? What were you feeling? What was that major lesson that you learned? And then you have a very distinct conclusion. You might wrap it up with an additional story or a discussion of your lesson learned that's done slightly differently. It depends on how it would fit most effectively. You may want to watch a couple of personal experience speeches online and see if there's a distinct way you enjoy that you think would work. But overall, that's sort of how we want it to go in terms of the outline. And you will need to have that outline for your speech. So please keep these in mind, and they should be available to you to sort of see this big picture format. So hopefully that'll get everything going for you guys. On the outline, a couple other things to keep in mind. Obviously, like I just mentioned, include an introduction and conclusion separate from the story itself. So you want the story to be the body, not the whole speech. The story should have a very distinct beginning, middle, and end. So it should be very obvious that that story is structured appropriately. The story should be very detailed. Again, don't forget about those thoughts and feelings. You want those to be a major part of your speech. and use examples, analogies, metaphors, descriptions of what you see, feel, smell, that kind of thing. And never forget to practice. Practicing, especially with any visuals that you'll be using, is very important to making sure everything flows smoothly. And in addition, there will be an example available to you. So see the example, check it out, and make sure you're on task. Best of luck to you guys. See you in the classroom.